Starting us off, at number 10, we have this. As this audio continued, the pilot's last word was, "It's over." The last words will haunt this man's family and friends forever. So that was recorded on the black box of Japan's Airlines Flight 123. It took place back in 1985 in Gama Prefecture, which is located in Japan, which is northwest of Tokyo. This flight killed 520 people on board. This accident was one of the deadliest single plane crashes in their history. This flight was on the eve of the Japanese holiday Bon, which is a festival to honor the spirits of one's ancestors. So everyone on this plane was on holiday. Many people were going to go visit their family and friends and loved ones. The pilot noticed an altitude change and he was losing control of the plane. The plane fell 10,000 feet and he continued to send distress calls and asked to be rerouted to Tokyo Airport. But almost 1 hour into the flight, it crashed into Mount Takamaghara. It took 14 hours for rescue crews to locate the plane and try to save as many people as possible. 4 people were able to survive the plane crash. The pilot was not one of them. Number 9, there were many phone calls made during the 9/11 attacks. It was a very devastating day for America and the rest of the world when a terrorist attack unfolded. Well, just minutes before United Airlines Flight 175 slammed into the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001, 38-year-old Brian Sweeney made his last phone call. The phone call was made to his wife from the back of the plane. Brian's wife didn't pick up the phone, which is just so heartbreaking to me, but on a voicemail he said, "I'm on a plane that's been hijacked. If things don't go well and it's not looking good, I just want you to know I absolutely love you. I want you to do good. Go have good times. Same to my parents and everyone. I just totally love you. And I'll see you when you get there. Bye, babe. I hope I can call you." I don't even know what to say about that. It's extremely a sad situation and a phone message you just never want to listen to. That phone call was placed just 3 minutes before the crash occurred. Moving into number 8, we have this also from the day of the horrific attack.
And there's somebody stabbed in business class, and we can't breathe in business class. Somebody's got mace or something.
Can you describe the person that you said someone is what in business class?
I'm sitting in the back. Somebody's coming back from business. If you can hold on for 1 second, they're coming back.
So that was from Betty Ann Ung. She was a flight attendant on the plane. She said someone was stabbed, she can't breathe, and thinks she is getting hijacked. Is it just me, or does she sound very, very calm about the whole thing? Betty was on flight 11, which was actually the first plane to become hijacked during the 9/11 attacks. Shortly after the hijacking, Betty notified the American Airlines ground crew, and she stayed on the phone for about 25 minutes. Because of this hijacking, it led to closing the airspace by FAA, which is the Federal Aviation Administration, for the first time in United States history. Number 7. So that was the last audio and video footage of the Brazilian football team that crashed. This took place on November 28, 2016. It was Alemia Flight 2933 that killed 71 of 77 people on board. The Brazilian football team was on their way to play in the 2016 Copa Sudamericana finals. The cause of this flight was unexcusable. It was due to fuel exhaustion, which means there was poor flight planning. And also there was a failure to declare an emergency after fuel levels became critically low. It seems like this accident could have been avoided. I'm sure that there was a massive class action lawsuit in place. Sadly, moving into number 6, we have a woman who texted her dad before her plane crashed. Enda, this girl right here, well, she's 30 years old, and she's actually a former Miss Indonesia finalist who sent her dad Peter one final text message just minutes before she and her husband were killed in a plane crash. The text message said, "Papa, how are you?" Also, Enda sent messages to several of her friends. Enda's father replied to his daughter's text message, but he realized that there was no answer, and and then after he realized why, after he watched the news. I would be so heartbroken, I wouldn't know what to do. Enda's plane mysteriously crashed into Perth's Swan River. Investigators are looking into the cause of the accident. Now at number 5, we have this. Alright, good night. That was said by either the pilot or co-pilot on Malaysian Airlines flight 370. This flight actually disappeared, and it's not known if this was intentionally or not, because why would someone flying the plane just say alright, good night, and there doesn't seem to be any distress? All 227 passengers and 12 crew members aboard the plane are presumed dead. The disappearance of flight 370 was the deadliest incident involving a Boeing 777 plane, and the deadliest incident of Malaysian Airlines history. The search for this plane became the most costly of aviation history. Investigators really wanted to know what the heck happened during this flight, but it seems like this will for now remain one of the greatest aviation's mysteries. Number 4.
Mayday, mayday, speedbird, 95.
That was the black box audio from British Airlines Flight 38. This Boeing 777 plane crashed back in 2008 at the London Heathrow Airport. The cause for the crash was fuel starvation caused by ice. Also, the ice caused a shorter runway to safely land the plane. Fortunately for this plane crash, there was no fatalities. There was 152 people on board and just 47 people sustained injuries. There was one serious injury. This plane was the first Boeing 777 to be written off in their history. In 2009, it was announced that 10 passengers were suing Boeing for the suffering that they had to go through. It was reported that each of the passengers, well, they could receive up to $1 million. The lawsuit alleged that the design of the aircraft was defective and unreasonably dangerous. All of the claims were settled out of court a few years later in 2012. Number 3. That was the last words recorded by the pilot and co-pilot of American Airlines Flight 191. This deadly crash happened on May 25th, 1979 that killed 273 people. The plane crashed due to loss of control that was caused by the engine coming off due to improper maintenance. This flight was going from Chicago, Illinois to Los Angeles International Airport. With 273 fatalities, it was the deadliest aviation accident to have occurred in the United States. There were no survivors. Number 2.
Morning, Adult. Do you want to go to Tamiami and land? You have a door open? Is that what you're saying?
I have a door ajar and a passenger that fell down. I am 6 miles from Tamiami.
That was a mayday call from the pilot of Piper PA-46 aircraft. This plane was about 2,000 feet in the air when a passenger fell out of the plane. Coast Guard and Miami-Dade Fire Rescue and Water United searched for the missing person. The Miami-Dade Police Department sent homicide detectives to the airport to further investigate what happened. Police have not indicated any evidence of foul play, so it was most likely an accident. But I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't be that calm if a passenger just fell out of my plane. Finally, at number 1, this one is insane. You are about to listen to an audio from a Horizon Air employee, Richard Russell, who decided to steal a plane and take it for a flight.
Ruin your day.
Just flying the plane around, you seem comfortable with that?
Oh, hell yeah, it's a blast, man. I played video games before, so I know what I'm doing a little bit.
Is this real life right now? This guy is absolutely insane. Apparently Richard Russell was described as a suicidal man, so he didn't care what he was doing. He decided he wanted to steal a plane and fly it wherever he wanted. Richard Russell did crash the plane, but just before the air traffic control was trying to help him, air traffic control was trying to help him land the plane safely. Richard knew that what he did might result in some jail time, so he wasn't really interested in landing the plane.
I'm going to try to do a barrel roll, and if that goes good, then I'm just going to nose down and call it a night.
Well, Rich, before you do that,
Let's think about this. I got another pilot coming up, Pilot Joel, here in just a minute or two, I hope.
Michael Jackson starts off this list in at number 10 with more milk. Milk was a nickname that he had given to the anesthetic propofol, which is the same drug that he overdosed on. His incompetent doctor said that he was pleading and begging to please let him have some milk because it was the only thing that would help him sleep. But on June 25th, 2009, the king of pop stopped breathing while he was sleeping under the care of his doctor, Conrad Murray. CPR was performed and resuscitation efforts was continued when he was taken to the hospital, but after an hour he was pronounced dead. His death was ruled a homicide and his doctor Conrad Murray was charged with the involuntary manslaughter. After Michael Jackson's passing, it triggered a worldwide outpouring of grief, and there was even a live broadcast of his public memorial service.
Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine. And I just wanted to say I love him so much.
Number 9 brings us to Paul Walker, who said, "We will be back in 5 minutes." The sudden death of Paul Walker was such a shock to people from all over the world. On November 30th, 2013, he attended a charity event for the victims of Typhoon Yolanda. As he was leaving the event, he got into his Porsche Carrera GT with a friend of his, but the car crashed into a concrete lamppost and instantly caught on fire. Paul Walker died from the combined effects of trauma and burns to his body. It was said that he was burned so badly that you couldn't even recognize him. The police said that neither of the men had any drugs or alcohol in their system, and there was no mechanical failure in the car. So they deemed that the car's speed and the age of the tires were the primary reasons for the fatal crash. Number 8 takes us to Ryan Dunn. He was a stunt performer who rose to fame after his extreme stunts and pranks were recorded on camera. He was mostly known for his appearances on the series Jackass. He died on June 20th, 2011 when his car swerved off the road where he hit a tree and it burst into flames. Just hours before the crash, he posted this picture online. So he posted that onto his Twitter account, and it's of him and his friends drinking a beer at a bar. His last words were, "Stopping for a beer, be there when I can." A toxicology report revealed that he had twice the legal blood alcohol level in his system, and he was driving at speeds of up to 225 kilometers an hour in a 90-kilometer zone. The final words of Heath Ledger makes its way onto this list at number 7. Katie, look, it'll be fine, you know. I just need to get some sleep. Well, those were his final words that he said to his sister over the phone. Katie was anxious about him not being able to sleep, and she was worried about him because he said that he was going to take sleeping pills on top of his other prescriptions for a chest cold. His sister warned him not to take the sleeping pills, but he refused to listen to her. On January 22nd, 2008, he was found unconscious in his bed by his housekeeper and his masseuse, and he died from an accidental intoxication from prescription drugs. His death was a result of many conspiracy theories, including one where people believe that his role as the Joker in The Dark Knight caused him to drive himself crazy, and he became lost in a dark place that he was never able to get out of. But ultimately, he had other issues that led him to taking too many drugs. Marvin Gaye brings us to number 6. You guys will recognize this iconic singer from one of his famous hit songs called Let's Get It On. It looks as though he was living a very successful life, but in reality, he was dealing with a lot of domestic issues. On April 1st, 1984, his father fatally shot him at their house in Los Angeles. His final words were to his mother, and he said, "Mother, I'm going to get my things and get out of this house. Father hates me, and I'm never coming back." He never got the chance to leave the house because he was fatally shot very soon after. It was reported that Marvin Gaye and his father had some very bad blood between them after Marvin Gaye intervened between an argument that his parents were having. Next up, number 5 is Frank Sinatra. "I'm losing it." According to the nurses at his bedside, these were the final words uttered by the iconic singer. Frank Sinatra died on May 14th, 1998 at the age of 82 years old after he suffered from a severe heart attack. He wasn't the healthiest before he suffered from this heart attack. He was constantly being hospitalized for heart and breathing problems, high blood pressure, pneumonia, and bladder cancer. His wife urged him to fight while the medics were trying to save and stabilize him, but that's when he said that he was losing it. The night after he passed away, the lights on the Empire State Building were turned blue, and the lights on Las Vegas Strip were dimmed in his honor. And also the casino stopped spinning for 1 minute. Number 4 takes us to Amy Winehouse. Her final last words were, "I don't want to die." She said this statement to her doctor over the phone 2 hours before she was found dead. According to her bodyguard, he was at her house 3 days before her death, and he noticed that she was mildly intoxicated. He continued watching her for the next couple of days, and he reported that she continued to drink, and she was watching TV until 2 in the morning on the day of her death. At 10 a.m., he saw her sleeping, but this wasn't unusual behavior because she was known to sleep in after a night out. However, at 3 p.m., when he went to check up on her again, he realized that she wasn't breathing and she didn't have a pulse. He called the medical services, who pronounced her dead on July 23rd, 2011, and that was at 3:54 p.m. Her death was being described as a tragedy. It was found that she had a lot of alcohol in her system. Whitney Houston's final words breaks onto this list at number 3. She said, "I'm gonna go see Jesus. Want to see Jesus." It was reported that the iconic singer talked about Jesus and religion during her final days. She apparently even told friends that she felt like the end was near, so she wanted to spend more time praising the Lord. The scary thing is, the night before her death, she performed a version of Jesus Loves Me. The next day, on February 11, 2012, she was found unconscious in her suite at the Beverly Hilton Hotel, submerged in bathwater. The cause of her death was later revealed to be the result of drowning due to a heart disease and cocaine use. Her death was deemed an accident, and her passing totally shocked the world. Moving into number 2, we have Kurt Cobain. He was the lead singer and guitarist of the famous rock band Nirvana. His last few years of life were full of drug addiction and the negative press that surrounds his relationship with his wife, Courtney Love. On April 8th, 1994, he was found dead in his Seattle home, and it was revealed that he shot himself in the head with a shotgun, and he had left a suicide note. In his note, he talked a lot about not being passionate anymore and feeling numb. One of the most memorable lines from his suicide note was, "It's better to burn out than fade away." Kurt Cobain was a highly influential artist, and his music still impacts people to this day. In a number 1 spot, we have Steve Irwin. The famous crocodile hunter died at the age of 44 years old, and this was back in 2006. And this was while he was filming a documentary about the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. The cameraman said that he was filming Steve when they came across a massive 8-foot wide stingray. The final shot was supposed to be the stingray swimming away from Steve, but instead the massive stingray lashed out and stabbed Steve Irwin hundreds of times in just a few seconds. He had 2-inch wide wounds over his heart with blood rushing out of his body. They managed to get him back onto the boat, and the cameraman, he kept saying, "Think of your kid, Steve, hang on, hang on, hang on." But Steve Irwin calmly looked up at him and said, "I'm dying." Those were his final words, and the footage of his death was passed on to his widow, who never released the video. This was a tough video to get through. My condolences goes out to the family, to the loved ones, whoever was touched or inspired by all of these celebrities we have talked about on this list.
Starting off this countdown, we have Jeffrey Dahmer. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of this infamous serial killer. Jeffrey Dahmer, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal or the Milwaukee Monster, was an American serial killer who murdered and dismembered 17 men and boys from 1878 to 1991. He would pack the victims' body parts into plastic bags and bury them behind his parents' home. Upon searching his home, police found albums full of pictures of body parts, and his place was filled with human remains. Heads were in the fridge and freezer, 2 skulls were on display, and a 57-gallon drum filled with decomposing bodies was found in his room. On top of that, there was evidence that Dahmer would eat some of his victims. On November 28, 1994, he was beaten to death by an inmate. His last words were, "I don't care if I live or die. Go ahead and kill me." Moving on at number 9, we have Robert Alton Harris. Robert Alton Harris was an American kidnapper, thief, and murderer. He was convicted for the murder of 2 boys in San Diego. On April 21st, 1992, he was sentenced to death via gas chamber. But first, let's talk about his last meal. This guy went all out. He had KFC, 2 large pizzas, a bag of jelly beans, and a 6-pack of Pepsi. Now, his last words were, "You can be a king or a street sweeper, but everyone dances with the Grim Reaper." This is actually a misquote from the 1991 film Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Nonetheless, pretty creepy. Making our way down the list at number 8, we have Clarence Ray Allen. Clarence Ray Allen was an American criminal who played a role in killing 3 people. In 1974, Clarence was on trial for the murder of his son's girlfriend. He had 8 witnesses testify against him. And guess what? He hired a hitman to kill those witnesses. The hitman successfully killed 3 of them and then was caught and turned Clarence in. Clarence died by lethal injection on January 17, 2006. His last words were, "Hoka hey, it's a good day to die. Thank you very much, I love you all, goodbye." Wow. In our 7th spot, we have Eileen Wuornos. Eileen Wuornos, often referred to as the Damsel of Death, killed 7 men. She murdered them, robbed them, and then drove home in their cars. Due to this, she was named America's first female serial killer. Now, she does claim that it was all self-defense and that they tried to assault her, but her stories of the events were very inconsistent. In fact, during an interview with a filmmaker, she claims that it was self-defense, but that she couldn't stand being on death row any longer since she had already been there for 10 years, and she just wanted to die, so that's why she confessed to killing the men. On October 9th, 2002, she was sentenced to death by lethal injection. Her last words were a reference from the movie Independence Day. She said, "I'd just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th. Like the movie Big Mothership and all, I'll be back." Now, people often cut this quote down and say that her last words were just, "I'll be back," but either way, it's pretty creepy and kind of like the Terminator, like, "I'll be back." Moving on, at number 6, we have Andre Chikatilo. Andre Chikatilo was a serial killer that confessed to murdering over 50 women. The murders took place from 1978 to 1990. In fact, he's been deemed one of history's sickest serial killers. On February 14th, 1994, he was executed by a gunshot to the head. Just before his death, he said, "Don't blow my brains out, the Japanese want to buy them." And then he was shot and killed. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Carl Panzram. Charles, or Carl Panzram, was an American serial killer, robber, and arsonist. He claims to have murdered 22 individuals. However, only a handful of them have been proved. In his autobiography that he wrote in prison, he also states that he committed thousands of burglaries, robberies, and arsons. On September 5th, 1930, at the age of 39, Carl was killed by being hung. His last words were, "Hurry up, you Hoosier bastard. I could kill 10 men while you're fooling around." In our 4th spot, we have H.H. Holmes. Herman Webster Mudgett, otherwise known as Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, or H.H. Holmes, was an American serial killer. In 1886, he moved to Chicago and got a job as a pharmacist under the name Dr. H.H. Holmes. However, he was killing people in order to steal their properties. He also got his employees to write him down as a beneficiary so that he would get all the money after he killed them. And then he would sell the bodies of his victims to medical schools. On top of that, he owned a house that was referred to as the Murder Castle. Basically, his home had secret passages, trapdoors, soundproof rooms, gas chambers, and a kiln to cremate the bodies. Eventually, he admitted to 27 murders. However, only 9 were confirmed. Yet, officials believe he had killed closer to 200 individuals. On May 7th, 1896, he was hung. His last words were, "Take your time. Don't bungle it." Moving on to number 3, we have George Engel. George Engel was an anarchist and con artist. He was thought to be involved in the 1886 bombing in Haymarket Square. Although the night of the bombing, Engel was home, he was arrested and charged with conspiracy in the bombing. He was hung on November 11th, 1887. Just before being hung, he said, "Hurrah for anarchy! This is the happiest moment of my life." In our 2nd spot, we have Tom Ketchum. Tom Ketchum, otherwise known as Black Jack, was a famous cowboy that later turned into an outlaw. He committed several robberies and crimes. In 1901, he was caught after a failed train robbery. Looks like they did catch him. Get it? I know, it's bad. While attempting to rob the train, he was shot in the arm and later captured by the police. On April 26, 1901, he was sentenced to death by hanging. His last words were, "I'll be in hell before you start breakfast, boys. Let her rip." Pretty scary. But that's not the worst part. Apparently, the hanging didn't go according to plan. The night before, the executioner tested the rope with a 200-pound sandbag, but then forgot to remove it. So when they went to hang Ketchum, this caused his entire head to just be decapitated. His body then fell to the floor and apparently remained upright on its feet for quite some time. And in our number one spot, we have the Dusseldorf Vampire. Peter Kürten, also known as the Dusseldorf Vampire or the Dusseldorf Monster, was a German serial killer. He was responsible for the deaths of around 60 people. And in one case, he actually drank the blood of one of his victims. Hence why they call him the vampire. On July 2nd, 1931, Peter was sentenced to death by the guillotine. But just before he was beheaded, he said this: "Tell me, after my head is chopped off, will I still be able to hear, at least for a moment, the sound of my own blood gushing from the stump of my neck? That would be the pleasure to end all pleasures." Yeah, can you see why he's number one on the list? That is probably one of the creepiest things I have ever heard.
Will I still be able to hear, at least for a moment, the sound of my own blood gushing from the stump of my neck? That would be the pleasure to end all pleasures.
Okay, starting things off at number 10, we have Eddie Justice. Eddie's last words were, "I'm gonna die." The Pulse nightclub shooting of the 12th of June 2016 shocked the United States and the rest of the world. At the time, it was the worst gun attack in modern American history. Sadly, that title was taken away following the horrifying Mandalay Bay shooting of 2017. In the nightclub, 49 people were killed and 53 injured when Omar Mateen stormed the LGBTQ club in Florida. When the shooting began at around 2 a.m., around 320 people were in the building. 70 managed to escape, but the rest remained as hostages. Now, these hostages were held captive by the ISIS sympathizer. Police efforts rescued a number of the hostages, but as negotiations broke down, Mateen started killing a number of people that he had trapped. One of them was Eddie, who was hiding out in the women's toilets with a number of other hostages. At first, he texted his mother Mina to say, "Mummy, I love you." Later, he wrote, "He has us, they need to come and get us," referring to his capture and the need for police intervention. One of his last texts said, "I'm gonna die, he's coming, I'm gonna die." Coming in at number 9, we have Kayla Muller. ISIS hostage Kayla Muller's last words to her family were, "We will be together soon." In a terrifying last message to her family, abducted aid worker Kayla Muller seemed resolute that she would be killed, and after nearly 2 years as a hostage, she was. The American was able to get the letter to her family via hostages that had been released. America, as you may know, has a no negotiation with terrorists policy, so from the moment of her capture, Kayla's days were pretty much numbered. It is thought that she was killed in a rescue attempt from the United States. Her body has never been recovered and returned to her parents, who still carry out hope of finding her remains. Coming in at number 8, we have Jürgen Kantner, the German sailor. His last words were, "Now he killed me." Jürgen Kantner and his wife Sabine Mertz were sailing off the coast of the Philippines and Malaysia when they were set upon by bandits with an allegiance to ISIS. In a horrible twist of irony, the duo had previously been taken hostage when they were set upon by Somalian pirates 8 years prior to their final capture. At that time, they were freed when their captors were paid a large ransom. Unfortunately, on the second capture, his wife was killed in the fray and Jürgen was held captive in the Sulu province jungle at an ISIS base. After nearly 3 months as a hostage, he was executed by ISIS. His execution was recorded and distributed. In it, Jürgen's last words are heard. Coming in at number 7, we have James Foley. James Foley's last words were very sad indeed. He said, "Great, captured on Thanksgiving and killed on my mother's birthday. American hostage James Foley was abducted by the Islamic State. He was working as a freelance war correspondent during the Syrian civil war and was abducted by ISIS in 2012. Nearly 2 years later, he was beheaded in August 2014. This was in a purported response to American airstrikes in Iraq. Now, he was the first American citizen officially killed by ISIS. Coming in at number 6, we have Ranita Williams. Ranita's last words were, "Stop, Jonathan, stop." Horrifyingly, they may have also been broadcast on Facebook Live. Ranita's ex-boyfriend Jonathan Robinson held her hostage inside her home in Shreveport, Louisiana. Her 36-year-old ex made her stream an apology to his new girlfriend while he held her at gunpoint. As the man got angry, he started shooting. She's heard pleading with him to stop. Now, the footage was enough to get police over to the woman's home, but it wasn't enough to save her. That being said, it was enough to land Jonathan in jail, although his sentence hasn't yet been determined. The state of Louisiana, of course, still does have the death penalty. Slightly different up next, but arguably some of the most terrifying words spoken on this list. We have the last words spoken by captors to their hostages. At number 5, we have the last words of the Haqqani network to hostages Joshua Boyle and Caitlin Coleman. Now, these last words were, "Kill the hostages," which is pretty much the last thing you ever want to hear if you've been taken hostage. Newlyweds Joshua and Caitlin were backpacking in Afghanistan in October 2012 when they were captured by the Haqqani, an arm of the Taliban. When the couple were captured, Caitlin was reportedly pregnant. The pair spent 5 years in captivity between Afghanistan and Pakistan and had 3 children under very stressful circumstances. The pair were rescued in September 2017 after a CIA drone spotted Caitlin in a militant camp in northwest Pakistan. In a heroic rescue, Pakistani troops deployed by the government managed to free the family, ambushing a truck that was transporting them to a new location. During the rescue, the last words they heard their captors speak were, "Kill the hostages." How truly terrifying. Coming in at number 4, we have Tory Johnson. Tory Johnson's last words were, "Oh my god." Johnson was the manager of the Lint Cafe that was held up by an ISIS gunman, Harun Monis. Monis trapped 18 people inside, and Johnson showed resolved bravery by staying with the hostages even though he could easily have escaped. He wanted to help protect the people still inside. The only 2 people who died were Tory Johnson, who was shot by Monis, and Katrina Dawson, a barista, who died as a result of a ricocheted bullet from the police storming rescue effort. A number of the surviving hostages have spoken of Johnson and Dawson's bravery. One fellow hostage, Julie Taylor, recalled Johnson's last words. She also praised his enormous strength of character for remaining with the hostages to the end. Coming into number 3, we have Brian David Sweeney. Among Brian Sweeney's last words were, "I'm on an airplane that has been hijacked. Things aren't looking good." Sadly, Brian Sweeney was on Flight 175 from Boston to Los Angeles on September the 11th, 2001, when he realized that his plane had been hijacked and he was being held hostage in the skies. Using a GTE airphone, he was able to leave a message on his wife's answer phone. The whole message is truly heartbreaking and terrifying to listen to. He says, "I'm on an airplane that has been hijacked. If things don't go well and they're not looking good, I want you to know that I absolutely love you. I want you to do good, have good times, same with my parents. I'll see you when you get here. I want you to know that I totally love you. Bye babe, I hope I'll call you." To be honest, I actually can't even. That's so sad. Coming into number 2, we have Aloha Pimentel. The last words the world heard from Aloha Pimentel were screams for help. In 2008, 15-year-old Aloha and her friend were attacked by her ex-boyfriend, 22-year-old Lindenberg Alves. This all went down at her home in Santo Andrea in Brazil. The man broke into Aloha's apartment holding a pistol. Initially, he kept 4 hostages, Aloha, her friend Nayara, and 2 boys. The boys were released and eventually so was Nayara, but the police later let her return to negotiate the release of Aloha, who was held hostage for 100 hours. She was seen and heard screaming out of a window for help, which was the last the public ever saw of her. The police eventually stormed the building and both of the girls were shot. Nayara survived, but Aloha died within hours of her injuries. The hostage crisis was well publicized and her funeral was attended by 10,000 people. Nonetheless, the general public were wildly critical of how the police responded to the incident. Okay, this has been been a truly sad and very haunting list, and to be honest, all of the last words from hostages are scary in their very nature, but I wanted to leave you with a more inspiring set of last words, if that could even be a thing. Coming into number 1, we have Fabrizio Quattrorucci. His last words were, "I'll show you how an Italian dies." Fabrizio was abducted by pro-Saddam Hussein Islamic gunmen during the Iraq War and was executed in 2004 when the Italian government refused to give in to demands by the militia. His assassins pointed a gun at him. He tried to remove his hood and screamed, "Now I'll show you how an Italian dies." Scary, but these were his last words, and they were enough to somehow show some true courage and spirit in the last moments of his life. They won him praise from the Italian foreign minister and Italian president. He was posthumously awarded the Gold Medal for Civil Valor. In a bittersweet twist of fate, his co-hostages were rescued in a bloodless raid by US troops.